Here I am again, folks. It's Richard Lewis. Is that who I really am? I had to struggle with this guy all my life. Holy shit. I deserve an award. Hi, everybody. This is Richard Lewis, alive and unwell. And I am unwell again. I should change the title. People are giving me a lot of grief that it's not positive. I think it's very positive, but it's like that old joke, at a circus, you can guess someone's weight, you stand, or you stand next to somebody who's heavy, you look thin, all that bullshit. I think that if I stay unwell, people will feel better about their own lives. I don't know, that's all bullshit too. I'm just excited to be back here again. My voice is a little raspy, didn't sleep that well. I never sleep well before this. And I've done these, I was a comedian for 50 plus years. And this is just, I'm talking to myself and to friends and the business. And I still feel like I'm backstage and I hear 5 minutes, Mr. Lewis, and that's my wife, who is the producer of this extravaganza. Davey Johnson. My God, we know each other for decades. We haven't spent a lot of time together. But he just finished his historic 50th year on the road with Elton John as the music conductor and the lead guitarist since 1971, man. He was rocking with Elton all these decades. My God. He has such an interesting life too, Davey, and he's such a nice guy. Well, you'll see. I'll let him do the talking. Yeah, sure, that's bullshit too. You see, I catch myself because I'm looking at me and I'm being the audience, and I say something that doesn't ring true to me, that I said about me. I got to tell you that it was wrong about me. The whole thing's so convoluted. I apologize up front, but I don't apologize for having Davey here. So let's bring him on live from somewhere in California. Davey. Unmute, baby. Says, see, my wife produces this, and every time we start a show, Joyce, don't worry about it. I'm not blaming you. I am blaming her. Joyce, Davey, can I unmute Davey, or does he have to do it? It's right here. Ask to unmute. How many times do I have to ask you, Davey?
There we go.
God, Davey. Hey, babe. It's all my fault.
There we go. Got you loud and clear now, man.
I know. Good morning.
How are you, buddy? Let me put you on two screens here. Hold on a minute.
Oh, I don't need any more personalities. What, more personalities? I have enough personalities, Davey. Am I on two screens?
Is that what?
No. Do you see me okay?
I see you great.
Hey, let me just, I know the glasses that you wear. I've always worn these for the last 15 years. Tell me if this is not a little bit of a rip off from me to you, but what
Love
do you think
it. I love it. Look, it's perfect. This is what we do in Southern California. I mean,
I know. I'm going to wear these for a while, David, just because to warm up to you. Let's start out by saying this. I've seen a lot of talks that you've given and interviews, and I've read stuff about you, but I want this to be stuff that just you and I bullshitting on the phone, man. Because, if you want to find out about Davey Johnson, you just go online. There's 8 million things to find out about. Listen, I've never been to Scotland, but I've been all out throughout Europe. And without getting too beat by beat, what was the atmosphere growing up? Let's say before your teens, because all my music friends, all the iconic players like yourself, they're in a band when they're 11, and all of a sudden they get picked up by a label at 12, and then they're leaving home at 13. And if it's amazing. What was the atmosphere, say, with your parents about your music, and how did they nurture it, if they did?
Well, I was really fortunate, Richard, because my parents were always really, really supportive of what I did. I mean, my dad suffered from rheumatoid arthritis, so he had a hard time getting around. It really affected all, his hands, his knees, his elbows, the whole thing, shoulders.
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah, but he what he did, I mean, even when I was playing soccer, I was a pretty decent footballer at school, and he would come to games in the fucking snow and the rain
Wow.
in Scotland, but he would show up every time I had a game, and that kind of taught me something early on in life about showing up, and they gave me a lot of support. I mean, we were not a rich family at all. In fact, we were like working class, which is what they call in the
Right.
UK. And so there wasn't a lot of spare money ever around. But you know what? When I was growing up, I never felt that. It wasn't an issue.
Wow.
We always had enough. My two sisters are 10 and 12 years older than me, respectively. So I was the kind of afterthought. I was the baby. But you know what? It was a very loving experience growing up in that house, a small, like house with 3 rooms and 1 bathroom. That was it, And
What kind of music did your sisters play that you got turned on to?
well, that was the cool thing. They were listening to, being a bit older than me, a good bit older than me, they were listening to Elvis, Buddy Holly. They had some Frank Sinatra records and some musicals, which I hated. I'm not a big fan of musicals, but the Elvis stuff just screamed at me. When I was 5 years old, I heard Jailhouse Rock, and it really jumped at me, and it was like, what is that? That's kind of what I want to do. And I was 5, so how did I know that? All I know is that it really spoke to me. And in those days, it was the big 78, breakable records. And one of our neighbors came in one day, Mrs. Marshall, I'll never forgive her. She sat on their copy of All Shook Up, the big Elvis.
Oh, wow.
And even at the age of 6, I almost ran her out of town because I was so furious. But yeah, I started taking violin at school at a very
Violin? Did you choose? Why did you take? You just were interested in seeing if you could do it. Isn't that known to be the hardest instrument in a school band, or not? It seems like it's difficult. Not to you.
I think a lot of them are difficult. But what happened was somebody came around our classes when I was at primary school, or you call it elementary school over here. And I was 7 years old, and some person came by and said, who in the classroom wants to learn to play the violin? And my arm just kind of went, it was like, I don't know. I just saw my arm up there. I'm going like, what am I doing? I don't. But it was really just a great thing because it taught me about stringed instruments and fingering and
right, I bet.
and skill about that thing. So by the time I was like 10, I was playing the violin like this, like a guitar or a banjo. And finally, my sister, with the help of some friends, got me a cheap acoustic guitar when I was 11 for my Christmas, and that was it. I was off and running. I was listening to the radio, waiting for the Beatles to come on or the Stones. And I'd learn the thing. I'd sit by the radio, waiting for a track. It's not like today, where people can download their thing and sit there for as long as they want. I had to do it on the fly. But I think in retrospect, that was really good for me because it really made me aware of what I had to do and about speed and time and the whole thing. So yeah, it was a great way to grow up. And as you mentioned, when you were talking about other musicians early, I left home when I was 17, and I just knew in my heart that, because I was already kind of a big shot on the folk music scene. I was playing mandolin and banjo and acoustic guitar and stuff like that. And it was a brilliant way to do it in Scotland, because there was a big folk revival in the UK back then in the late 60s. Yeah, from like 67 onward through to the early 70s, kind of the same as you had over here. And so I was I was already playing a lot of clubs and pubs and stuff and making my own money. And that was kind of attractive. So I left Scotland because I realized, as great as it is and as much as I love the country, there was no way I was going to go to the next level. So, I had to leave and go to the big city. And, a guy that I met, a guy called Noel Murphy, who unfortunately passed away last year. He was a brilliant comedian and Irish singer, and he was just great. And he had told me once when he was playing in a club in Scotland that I would visit, and he said to me the mistake of, if you're ever in London, look me up.
Oh boy.
So that's essentially what I did. I got to London having never been there before, with like $20, equivalent of that in my pocket. Went to his home and knocked on the door. And, of course, he said, "The fuck are you doing here?" And I said, "Well, you said."
You took him up on it.
Yeah. So we joined up together, and we started making, having this duet, this duo thing, and it was fantastic. And we did really well. And really, that's what my whole thing just kicked off from there.
But what did you call, Davey? What did you call the duet, the duo?
Well,
did you have a name?
We did.
Well, you had to have a fucking name, obviously.
That's right. Well, the first name, because his name was Noel Murphy, the first name we came up with was Murph and Shaggis. I was Shaggis.
That sounds like a Yiddish expression. Ah,
Exactly.
you Shaggis. So what does Shaggis mean?
Well, it was a word that Noel came up with because he was a very funny guy. And
Yes.
he always referred to people from Scotland from eating a lot of haggis. So you're like a shaggy haggis, so it became Shaggis, and it kind of stuck. So it was great. And then later on down the line, when we wanted to get a bit more trendy, we changed our name to Draft Porridge. Again, it was a wonderful vision, of porridge coming out of a draft tap in a pub, Anyway,
look, I believe you. I believe in this guy. I think maybe he had a drug problem. You can tell early on with names of a group. I could be wrong, but he really was instrumental in getting in sort of helping you get out of the house and start your career big time. It seems to me.
Very much, and we went, because he also was a funny guy who knew a lot of people. I mean, I couldn't believe it. I came to London and joined up with Noel. So we're doing these gigs in pubs and so having a great time, making money. I was really making a lot of Guinness money. That was what I was doing.
Yeah, right.
It was a treat. But he knew people because he was also a wonderful golfer. So he would meet people on the golf course because although he was a crazy, hairy-looking 6'4" Irish geezer, he played great golf. He played like off handicap of 2. So people in the entertainment world became really enamored of Noel, and they would love playing with him because he was funny as hell, And so I met all these great comedians early on. I don't know, are you familiar with Eric Sykes?
I've heard the name.
Yeah, he was a British comedian back in the 50s and 60s. He was wonderful, and also people like Eric Morecambe and Wise.
Oh yeah, they're brilliant.
And that kind of thing. And then again, some pop stars. I met Dave Davis, and we started playing football together or soccer.
Wow.
And in fact, we know our dear friend Daniel, who is Daniel's father, Dave Davis, and so I met him on the soccer field, and other stars, and way before I joined Elton, when I was doing stuff on the folk circuit, I met people like Princess Margaret. Well, I met, first of all, my big thing was I met George Best. Now, George Best.
The footballer.
Yeah. And what a great guy. And to meet him, I thought that was it. I died and gone to heaven.
Davey, time out on the field.
Sure.
I got to ask you, and hold the thought, because I was very rude, but I want to go back to an introduction and then fast forward to where we were just at, because this is so interesting to me, and to anyone who loves your work. I want to congratulate you on such a historic finish. They say finish, but never say never. 50 years with Elton on this final, allegedly, Yellow Brick Road tour, which the write-ups for the whole year were so unbelievable. And the thing that really meant a lot to me, not meant a lot to me, but really made me feel almost with a tear in my eye, is when I read that Elton, I think it might have been in Scotland, your last time playing, at least for now, with the band and with Elton in Scotland, he singled you out for being his guy and musical director and 4,000 shows. I mean, this is, and when you go back to your playing the violin, you know, I know you never could imagine that this would have happened, but what a wonderful message for musicians, young musicians, that it's never too late and it's never too early. That's the real message. Never too early to start. Because when you started in 71, you were already with Elton. I think, is that your first year, Madman?
Yeah, I played on that album in 1971. That's right.
Yeah, because that's when I went on stage for the first time. And I was trying to figure out last night, you did 4,000 shows. I was going, well, let's see, 4,000 shows. That's 80 concerts a year times 50. That's 4,000. That's a lot of concerts, man. So I was trying to figure out, I said, what did I do? I mean, I wasn't, your concerts were, you know, in front of 100,000 people, 50,000 people. I was sometimes at a nightclub in front of 4 people that were dressed as you know, I can't even think of the joke. It would be too dirty. You know, when you're starting out as a comedian, that's why I was talking to Frampton about this too. And it's the same thing. I said, you know, you guys, like you just showed, are starting to get involved in the business at 17 years of age. And when comedians, you just can't get up on stage when you're 11, you know, and hold a microphone, you know, and then pee in your pants, you know, or you know, so it's a remarkable feat, and congratulations. I mean, this is such an iconic, historic act, band. I mean, the band changed. You were the last guitar standing, because there were changes in 40 years. It'd have to be, but there was a core band for a while that I mean, you probably enjoyed all of it. And I can't imagine, you know, we know people that maybe are in a band for 1 week and they go, that fucking guy, you were firing. I can't imagine how many discussions you had after 40 years. There must have been a lot of personnel changes. Am I wrong?
No, you're dead right. That kind of thing happens. But really the strongest, and you mentioned about that, the core band, because thankfully we ended up the whole tour with 4 of us who were in the core band, you know, which was, you know, Elton, myself, right, Nigel Lawson, the drummer, and Ray Cooper, the percussionist. Right. Ray kind of was in and out of the band all through the career, but we always considered him a band member because he's just the most ridiculous percussionist person and all the rest of it. Right. Yeah, that core band also included my dear friend Dee Murray, the bass player, who unfortunately he died back in the early 90s. He was taken away too soon from melanoma, and it was just a tragic loss. Yeah, many changes, many wonderful musicians again who we lost through tragedy. Guy Babylon, wonderful keyboard player, he passed away, massive heart attack when he was in his swim club. Our bass player, and also in the 90s, Bob Birch, he couldn't handle the pain anymore from a terrible accident he had involving getting hit by a truck when he was walking home.
Jesus.
You know, like, how does that happen? You know, Bob was amazing and a lovely man. And so, yeah, over the years, there's all these people that change for whatever reason. And as you said, very often, you know, Elton would say to me, you know what, change the band up. You know, in fact, I remember one time he said, okay, I need to have a black bass player, a black drummer, and 3 big black lady singers, you know. And I'm going, well, all due respect, Elton, but that's going to be a tough call, you know, calling people up and saying, you know,
yeah, no shit,
what's your pizza intake or whatever else you're going to do, you know, in that situation. But, you know, it was great because I love that when because I know a lot of other players and stuff like that. And we were able to get Michael Jackson's drummer, Jonathan Moffat, who's known as Shoot. Jonathan and I are dear friends, and he came in and played for a few years with us. So there's been many changes, but the original band that made all the really big classic records was Elton, myself, Dee, and Nigel. That was the 4-piece, and it was only 4 guys. People seem to think there was some massive thing with all these different players and this and that. It was 4 of us, and because I was the only other melodic player from Elton, you know, because we had a drummer and a bass player, who would occasionally play a little bit of maybe Hammond organ on track, or a bit of mellotron or something different. But all the other stuff was down to me. So I would be playing, and there was a lot of layers on our music back in those days. So I just developed into this multi-instrumentalist. So it was really great for me. And
So, Davey, so when you would lay down a track, and then Elton didn't have to be there, and you would do overdubs and just let him hear the track or was he always there when you were doing laying down other stuff after you first laid down I don't know the right terminology, but when you lay down the song and everyone's happy, but there's still overdubs, right? And harmonies and throw in another, they might want you to come in with a banjo for 2 seconds. Who knows? But I mean,
exactly.
were you responsible for a lot of that?
Well, a lot of it, but the thing was, the interesting thing is that when we laid down the basic tracks, we did it really old school. And to me, it's still the proper way for musicians to collaborate, which is 4 of us in the same room playing together. You know, Elton would write the song. I'd be around the piano, maybe taking note of a couple of chords or suggesting a couple of things to him or whatever. Dee would be listening in and getting his bass part started.
That's cool.
And then an hour later, literally, we would record the song. And it was such a beautiful experience because nobody told anybody else what to play. And as you're saying, after that basic track was laid down, and after Elton had finished his lead vocal, of his own harmonies and stuff like that, in many cases, sometimes he would just head off and go off and do something else, because, you know, he's got a very short attention span. So the kind of tedious parts of recording, we would take over. We'd do all the back vocals, which would take a long time, relatively in those days, for the most part. And I would do all the guitar overdubs and whatever else we wanted to do. So yeah, it's very much like you were saying, but the initial tracks were always done with Elton and, you know, the 3 of us. And
what about, I would imagine, I know for a fact that the producer of an album is so crucial. So there must have been, who stood the test of time better than anyone? Is it something you wouldn't want to even voice an opinion to, or did you have
I'm glad you asked that, Richard, because Gus Dudgeon produced all these classic records. And when we moved on later, Chris Thomas took over. Chris, who had done the Sex Pistols, the Pretenders, and people like that. But Gus, again, tragically died. He and his wife Sheila were kind of like, they were part of our family. Gus was a brilliant producer. He, in fact, was the guy who was more responsible for getting me involved with the Elton thing, because we had met doing other recordings with other bands. For example, Gus produced Space Oddity for David Bowie.
Wow.
Yeah, and he was a brilliant producer, and he produced a folk band called Magna Carta. And I was actually.
Oh, you were in that band. That's what started the whole. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. So he caught you, and that's how he got turned on to your musicianship.
Yeah, that's kind of how it happened. And then he said one day, I'm doing this record, and he talked about him occasionally when we were maybe having lunch one day or something, or having a cup of tea or whatever. And he said one day, look, I've got a couple of tracks that I really would like you to play on. That, you know, it's for this guy, and he, you know, he's piano player. I said, oh, I know the guy you're talking about. And you know, at that point, Elton was he'd done his iconic show at the Troubadour with Dee Murray and Nigel Lawson, 3 of them, 3-piece band. Great little show. I
didn't know that.
Just bubbling under, but everybody knew he was carrying some serious weight, because he had great songwriting, great singer, great piano player. He was going to be a force to be reckoned with. But he realized he wanted to make it a proper quartet with a guitar or whatever. So that's why I was asked to join. And, you know, it didn't take me long, although it was kind of a big step for me. It was one of those things of, do I want to remain a big fish in a small pond, like carry on playing folk circuit, doing studio work and having that kind of comfort zone? Or do I want to join this guy and suddenly become this kind of rock star? And I decided, fuck it, why not? Let's go for it and let's do it. And it was a big moment. But you know what? the four of us were inseparable. The touring was nonstop. The albums were nonstop. We would literally do record, tour, another album, tour, record a single, another tour, do a tour of Japan, do another album. It was like that for the first like 5 years. And I think that's why it was such a concentrated amount of music came out at that time that people seem to love and identify with, you know.
David, a takeaway I get from a couple of things. You were at a stage in your life and, you were just a very young man. And when this guy, suggested you to be, make that foursome happen with Elton, you can think about it, but, I guess at that age, you're not sure where you're going to be solo. I mean, how far it's going to go, how many hits you'll have, and you really believed in Elton and believed in this group. And, it reminds me, I know, Terry Reid, of course, this terrific singer, and he's a friend of mine. And he's a great soloist, singer, but legend has it that he could have been in Zeppelin, but he'd just rather go his own route. Now, some people would say, it would have been a different band anyway. But, what you doing this with Elton is, I can't imagine Elton John without Davy Johnson. I can't imagine it. I mean, that's what you become. It's just an amazing journey. I want to ask some neurotic questions. Don't mock me when you see me next. I retired from stand-up about 3.5 years ago. I went out on my own terms. I felt strong. I had the best tour of my career, and I had a couple of health issues. So I said, get out now. You're getting out strong. But I know so many musicians and pardon me, rock stars. I hate saying that to you, but it's true. When you travel, tell me, when does it happen when you travel? I know you won't even understand this fucking question, David. When you're in your hotel room and you're going and the road manager picks you up, do you put all your clothes in your suitcase and then they take it? Do you do anything when you leave one hotel in Paris to go to a hotel in Berlin? Do you do anything? Because I traveled alone for 50 years. I didn't want anyone looking at me. I didn't want sneaking around my suite or my hotel room. They went from dives to hotel. I don't want them to see who I'm dating. I want to be totally alone. But that meant packing myself, making sure my publicist didn't screw up the cars and all. It was a nightmare, and I couldn't wait to get on stage because I had to do all this other shit. How is it handled at your level? I really need to know. The traveling. How is it handled?
Oh, like you said, it's a nightmare. The traveling, the hotels, the schlep, that's the whole thing, and the sitting around. That's the whole thing where you go, why am I doing this? In fact, I think Charlie Watts, our dear friend Charlie, he'll live forever in my heart.
Yeah.
I once heard him say something that was so appropriate about this whole thing that you've just asked me about. Somebody was asking him, I think it was around about their 25th anniversary, so it's quite a while ago. It was back in the 80s. And somebody asked him, so Charlie, congratulations on 25 years with the Rolling Stones. How does it feel? And Charlie said, well, it feels like I've been hanging around for 20 and playing for 5. And that's about it. But you said you can't wait to get on stage and do your thing. That's what you live for. And that was the way it was for me right up to the end. I must admit, the last couple of weeks were very special for me on this tour because my wife Kay and our kids, Elliot, Juliet, and Charlie came over with their boyfriends and girlfriends, came over for the last 2 weeks of the tour and traveled around with me, but they traveled around on their own ticket. Kay was their tour manager, as it were. But they came to Glastonbury, which was just iconically crazy. It was wonderful. They came to Paris, where we played a couple of shows, and I ran into my old friend Lenny Kravitz. I'm not name dropping, but Lenny is
one of okay. I'll name drop right after you.
Guys that I just always have adored. We've known him since his first album, and we're big friends. And they came to Copenhagen because that's where my wife's from. for the 2 shows there, and then they came to Stockholm for the last 2 shows. So for me to have the family there, it really took my mind out of what a schlep it is traveling, because I was so happy to be able to be with my kids in those towns and hang
I
out.
bet.
We should hang, it'd be silly, it'd be crazy. And it really was a lovely way to end the whole thing up. And yeah, I think that traveling thing, as you've mentioned, that's the killer. If you can stay with that, if you're a musician, a comedian, or whatever you do, an actor, if you can live with that thing of that isolation,
Right.
and power to you, that's the hardest part of this whole thing, I believe. Yeah.
That's true. You know, what I said before was really stupid. I knew that you wouldn't totally understand because it was so stupid, Davey. What I was saying, that I travel as I was, whether it was a nightclub, Carnegie Hall, town, wherever it was just Richard Lewis. I'm on the plane, I'm alone. I don't have to look back and see how the bass player's doing or the drummer, or I would hopefully put him in the front with me, or at the time when I started out in the back, but I had to do everything. The question I asked is so stupid, but like when you're going from city to city and playing in, you know, arenas and stadiums, I would imagine that, I guess what I'm trying to say is, it was such a long 50 years of traveling, not so much how hectic it is and how tedious it is, but just getting around on my own without having anyone do it for me. So I was just asking, how isn't it done like in the best possible way for you guys and for Elton? I mean, I can't imagine, other than being tired schlepping, they do the schlepping for you, don't they, mostly?
Oh, you know what? We have just had the most incredible. You're absolutely right, Richard. It's a different level. But even from the very beginning, when I joined him and came to America for my very first time, you know, even in those early days, the big deal was that we chartered a Greyhound bus. No, there was nothing nice about it. It was the fucking gray leather seats or whatever, Naugahyde seats in a Greyhound bus. And that was our big claim to fame, that there was, you know, us 4 in the band, and then there was our tour manager and our lighting guy, and that was it, you know, on this.
I got you.
But now what it's developed to, and it's a phenomenal thing. It's still a schlep, packing your own cases. You got to do what you do and do your thing, close them all up. But then somebody picks up the cases. We got a wonderful assistant who, for the last 7 or 8 years, has been, you know, wonderful. Jinju Maddy, who's been incredible, and then you've got DC Parmet, who's probably the best production manager. They put all these logistics together with the flights, the hotels,
the whole deal.
There's people like Tina Waters, there's people like Keith Bradley. These are the real brains behind a tour, which, as you say, they really look after us. They make sure that it's going to be as easy as possible, because when you're dealing with a band, now our band is 6 people plus Elton, but then you've got the assistant and you've got a couple of other people. So that's the one lot. And then there's Elton's part, you know, with his security, his bodyguard, his hairdresser, his assistant, you know, people like that.
Yeah, that's a whole entourage.
And then there's 50 in the crew. 50 people in the crew, so there's something like 40 trucks going around in buses.
Yeah, I'm so glad I asked you this, because they deserve a lot of credit, these people. And sometimes, you know, because they really, you know, when you're talking about your children, you have an amazing family, and I wrote you the other night, you know, I think it was toward the end of the pandemic when you did a solo album, but with a tremendous, I think it was Deeper Than My Roots. That was the title track. It was the title of the album. Right. And it's a magnificent album. I really loved it. My wife Joyce, we really love it. And I asked you about one track, and you had three kids on one track, and I think Elliot, is he the vocalist?
Yeah, he is.
Mean, they're all sensational. You know, I'm not like a music freak. I mean, listen to the bass player, listen to the drum. I heard that voice right out of the gate, and it's something else. I mean, and not to mention, I got to just boast a little bit. In '67, this is a loose association, Davey. When Sgt. Pepper came out, there was a montage of all these famous people. And one of the heads that were in there was Lenny Bruce, who is my hero in stand-up. So I know, and your daughter's a fine artist, and she did the liner notes, and I see on one track, there's my ridiculous head giving the Johnny Cash finger. just tell her if she ever needs a joke for a dinner party or any, I mean, I've never had my face in a liner notes before. I was so shocked and excited about it. But more importantly, how talented she is. I mean, her artwork is it's just what an overview she has. She's well on her way if she's not already. I mean, my God, and your boys.
And you don't remember, but I actually called you up and checked with you. If it's okay, I'm doing a collage of some of my friends and people that I've
You
met.
did?
Me, and you went, sure, whatever, or go away, leave me alone, something like that. That was your response.
I wouldn't say go away, leave me alone. But Davey, I have no, I'm 67. No, I'm 76. See, I'm even dyslexic with my age. You think I'm going to remember you saying, Richard, my daughter's doing a thing. Can we use a picture? Yeah, sure, Davey. Boom. I mean, I'm not going to fucking care. I just love you and you have an amazing family. And but the album is terrific, and you're terrific, man. You know, we didn't. I just needed to get to your roots, talking about the title. You know how it started. Then I know about the folk history is great. I wish you had a banjo or a mandolin around. You could fret us off. No, that's okay.
I do have a banjo lying around, as it happens. We're in the room.
Really?
Yeah, I have a loose room where I have like mandolins, banjos, bits and pieces, lying around.
Where's your banjo assistant? Don't you have a banjo assistant?
No, not when I go home, man. No, I don't have a banjo tech.
I know, man. Banjo tech. Well, I was going to ask you to play the just see. I was going to throw you a hard one from Deliverance, but you don't have to. You've given me plenty.
Speciality when I was growing up. Hold on, let me grab my banjo.
Oh, he's gonna put me up on this.
Pants. These are Juliet's.
Oh wow.
Pants are crazy. She's amazing. Anyway,
do you have to water your clothes at night, or what is that? Are those flowers?
Yeah, she's remarkable. What she does.
What's it? Does she have her own brand now? Is that the deal?
Yes, it's just called JulietJohnstone.com, and that's it. And she has this ridiculous line of clothes. But here, this is this banjo, Richard.
Wow.
Is the one that I traveled down from Scotland with when I was 17.
No shit. That's
this,
fantastic.
I had a mandolin, I had one acoustic guitar, but my thing was playing Irish music. So it's really when you played in Irish pubs. I don't know if you've ever been to Dublin.
No, in one city I missed, unfortunately.
Oh, what a great! I mean, so all the folk scene, like when you hear the banjos and fiddles and all that great lively music, would happen in pubs and either all over the UK.
Like the Clancy Brothers. Did the Clancy Brothers play a lot of banjo? The Clancy Brothers.
Yeah.
This is a treat, man. I hope the volume's coming through on your end. Do you hear me? Could you hear me? I didn't hear I couldn't hear the banjo that loud, but you can hear me, right?
Oh yeah.
Oh, and then I hear you. Yeah, that's a beautiful. Who bought you this banjo, and what was the history behind it?
Well, there was a banjo player in a band called the Dubliners, which were a folk band, and they were wonderful, just brilliant players. And the banjo player in that band was Barney McKenna. Now, when I first heard Barney play this style of music, and I'd only be maybe 13 or 14, but I heard this from a folk record somebody let me borrow. And when I heard it, it was like the Elvis moment. I heard this banjo thing and I'm going, holy shit, I want to do that. See, that's the kind of player that I've always been. If I hear something that interests me, I've got to learn how to do it. Or I really want to.
Wow, that's a good habit.
When I heard that, it was like a real moment for me. So I just I started off with a really cheap piece of shit little thing about this banjo mandolin, it was called, that I got in Scotland. And then I developed, and as I started making money in folk clubs, I found this one, in a music shop in Scotland, and I just bought it with every penny I had. And in those days, it wasn't like today. I mean, you could buy something for a couple of £100. It wasn't like today where everything's all good instruments are $1,000, and upwards. But this is a great instrument. But again, it's a tenor banjo, so it's like
This unbelievable. You know, you don't look anything like Pete Seeger, but I'll tell you right now. Now it's between Pete Seeger and you for me and for the folk history. Yeah.
That's all I'm playing.
What about Davey? What about, I always ask guitarists like you, what about the 12 string? Did you fall in love with that, or is that?
12-string guitar?
Yeah.
How did you, this is so weird. I mean, right next to the banjo, it's 12
Do
string.
you really?
Now, we haven't planned this, right?
No. Plan this. He thinks this is planned. This is the loosest interview in history.
It's literally,
Let me see. Holy shit. How do you like that?
and it's a great one too. This has been on a lot of Elton records. For example,
Do you know bells of Rimney? Where have you been to? And the bells of Rimney. Oh, look, I'm telling him what to play. That's a beautiful good. What is you have your own brand, right? Of a guitar that's signed by you and all this. Doesn't
no, I
everyone?
don't have a signature guitar. I used to get free guitars from Gibson because I played Les Pauls and Explorers and that kind of thing. And Gibson used to send me, they sent me a beautiful double neck. They sent me a Flying V, lots of beautiful instruments. And that's when we were like a big deal in the 70s and 80s. Then that kind of went away for a while.
I see.
To be honest with you, I haven't really followed up on that kind of situation. I know a lot of people like to do that, but I'm more of a guy that I just like instruments for the way they sound and the way they are. And I'm not really about to get launched into some campaign and promote myself in that way. I'm not like that. But
If anyone didn't need any more for a career at this point in life, it's you, Davey. And and to have this historic tour and this year and in Scotland with your family and doing that album last year with the kids, I couldn't be happier for you. I adore you and I love you for being on this very high pressured show. This will be in a space capsule when they land on Mars. Both of us will be aliens. So I'm going to sign off now and tell you that I love you and thanks for being on Alive and Unwell. And I'll see you around the block, man.
Love you, Richard. Thanks so much for having me, man. I love you.
And love to the family.
Amen. Take care.
All right. Chill.